I was lucky after my first year of architecture school, I got a job with an architect, and it wasn't because of, theory 1 and 2. It was because of what I learned in high school, because I knew how to draw a floor plan. I knew how to use a scale. And again, we were still hand drafting back then. So I knew how to draw a building section, elevations. So, I know a lot of schools are getting rid of that, but I feel really lucky that I was able to do that because now I know if you're building something in Revit, it creates your sections for you. So you don't have to really, think so much about what you're doing. It's a little bit easier, but at the same time, I think you lose that knowledge of really thinking, how does this work when you're actually drawing it?
Yeah. And do you know what the students do after your course in terms of their track? Are they going more a contractor route or engineering?
So my students are mostly non-traditional. The classes are in the evening. So, so there's an associate's degree, but there's also a certificate that's promoted to the trades. So I've had students who are plumbers, electricians, project managers. I had one that was a surveyor that was looking to change careers and go more into an office role. I've had students that hadn't entered the profession yet. One was a bartender, and I had her for a couple classes, and she went on to become an assistant project manager. So there's just a wide range. Very few of my students are just right out of high school who want to go into construction. So I think, 2 students that wanted to continue their education and go into civil engineering. So it's, kind of a broad range. And the students can also matriculate to Morgan State University in Baltimore and move into their construction management program. And some of those credits transfer, which is really nice. So I like that they're non-traditional because, the ones that have experience, they can speak up to, things they've worked on and share it with the class.
Yeah. And the variety, because that would just be a fun group. Like, right. I don't know, all the classes in architecture school, you kind of have your class and it's that year and you just follow and you do the exact same classes. You don't really integrate with any other disciplines even. That's well, what if I could take an engineering class with structural engineers or, different things and how that would change people's perspective on just understanding what we do beyond our own discipline. So
right. And we've been having talks with the Revit instructor to, if I do teach the BIM class this fall, to bring in some of his students and not just construction management students, bring in some of the interior design students or the engineering students. So they have an understanding of BIM a little bit beyond Revit and understand why you use it and how it's going to be used. But it's been really good just, hearing stories. One of my students managed the fleet of trucks that Amazon uses. So he could speak to, when you're trying to have inventory and the struggle with getting inventory, to do repairs on the trucks. How can that compare to being a contractor and trying to get materials out to the site?
Yeah. And I want to jump into the session that I met you at AI National, because you talked about CM practices in the design side. So planning out projects. I know I typically just see a bigger Gantt chart and that's about it. And it's okay, you get how many months to do design, but it's okay, besides that deliverable, we could break it up a lot like contractors do with what do you need when and information. So do you have any advice from putting together that presentation and your experience for architects and how to bring the CM strategies you've learned to the design side so we can be more profitable and efficient?
Yeah. So the first thing I would say is, planning a project. So a lot of times, in my career, we were just given, here's a list of dates. The owner wants our permit by this date. You got to work backwards. Or maybe we had, our SDs are due this date, our DDs are due this date, but there was never a plan on how to get there. and you're just expected to do what you needed to do. So, learning and even, what I've learned from just teaching, planning and scheduling, think about your resources. Do you have the staff to actually make that happen? How are you calculating your durations in your fee schedule? I remember on one job, I got yelled at by our office manager because I was over budget. And I said, should I not finish the project? What am I supposed to do? And I didn't know really how my boss came up with that time to get that work done. And one of the things I've become involved in the past year with the local lean community of practice, and we did a pool planning session, which comes from obviously lean construction, where each, just like in construction, the trades write down. You say, maybe we're going to start in 2 weeks. Where do we need to be? The trades write down what they need to get done to do that. But I went to an activity where it was for architects and engineers. And I found it really difficult because, you were in different roles. You're the architect and the MEP engineers. And in your head, it needs to be done before the, electrical engineer can lay out the lighting. But when you're actually standing there with your Post-its and you really have to talk it over and think about it, it's really hard. And to me, I think that's one of the first things that the profession needs to do is really understand how to plan a project, how to make sure that you can actually make that happen. Is your staff, what's their other project load? Because we all know that, we might have a project in CA or we're waiting on an owner to make a decision on another project. So, kind of like contractors, and I know they get moved around a lot, like in land development, when you have bad weather, you have to kind of put them on other sites because you might not be able to work at that time. So I think that's the first step, is really planning a project, understanding your resources, understanding how everything's connected. I think, strategic management. So it wasn't, that's obviously not limited to construction, but if you're an owner of a firm, it's easy to write on your website, this is our mission, our values, but I've never had any kind of formal discussions in the firms I worked with about how to really get there and what's the expectations of the staff. So, there's something in lean called conditions of satisfaction. So what is your client really expecting? You say, here's a set of drawings to build from. What are you really expected to do? What's the expectation of quality? And, from there, risk management is another big one. The book that I mentioned that we use in our construction claims and changes, the author developed this risk management. So you go through, and I took that and I actually have been building it for my company. When I go to a webinar and I hear something, I add it to the list. And it's, it is risk, but everything can be a risk. What are your existing conditions? Are you measuring it by hand? Are you having the whole building scanned? Those are kind of risks for the project. I was talking to a fellow architect who now works as a construction manager, and she said the company she works for, before they start construction, they sit down and spend a day and go through all the potential risks in the project. So I don't ever recall that happening when I was an architect, that we really talked about, time for the owner to make decisions. How long is it really going to take us to flesh out a plan? What if we get some feedback and we have to go back? How does that impact the fee? So those are kind of, sort of the main things that I think of based on my experience, how architects can incorporate that and think a little bit more like contractors about planning a project. And granted, design isn't just, start and finish, but, if you think you're going to spend time to do pinups in your office and get feedback, that should all be in your schedule and be in your fee.
Yeah, because a designer may say, well, design's not linear, it's messy. And I'm like, well, you can still organize the messy, but
Right.
If you stay messy too long, then you don't have time to actually get the documents done. And then you're either staying up late, working weekends, get burned out, or you put out a bad drawing set. And then it just makes everything harder when you're trying to actually build it. So But if you schedule the fluffiness or the pinups, then you have a start and stop point with it.
Right.
And I don't know how many conversations people have with owners on how long do you need to review something? If something's off to you, do you need 2 weeks to review? Are we okay to proceed? If you're not okay to proceed without sign off, then that could be 2 weeks that you have your whole staff just wide open. And if you don't prepare for it, they're sitting there twiddling their thumbs, and other projects could be drowning. You could help them out and shift people around a little bit.
Right. And we talk about in my planning and scheduling class about, crowding on a job site. So I think the same thing can apply when you're working on a job. And I know I've been in this experience where there's a big deadline, so let's throw everybody at that project. People don't know what's going on. The project manager is trying to do their work, and they're trying to make sure this person has something to do. And then everybody's on top of each other. So how do you, really understand where your staff is and, when they're going to be finished? And when I first learned scheduling software, I was like, wow, why don't architects use this? And I know in the AI presentation, a few people raised their hand that they do use scheduling software. And I think that's great because it really makes you think critically about what you're doing. You just don't have an Excel fee schedule and throw some dates on there and just kind of wish it'll happen.
Yeah, exactly. And I want to shift over into your own business. So I know you combine planning, problem solving, and management, and help owners, contractors, and design teams. Can you tell me a little more about everything you're doing with your business? I know you hinted at a couple things in your intro.
So it's still a startup. So what I'm doing, a big part of what I'm doing is a lot of marketing and business development. And that's been a struggle for me a little bit because I really had no experience with that, and just understanding how to get your message across and promote yourself and introduce yourself, going to networking events and having to meet people and say, this is what I do. Again, if you're like a school board and you're going to do a school renovation, you probably understand that you will go to a construction manager to assist with that. But if you're a business owner, a lot of times you don't realize that there are people out there that can help you. Or if you're a church, I've worked on church projects where you have a committee and there are accountants and teachers, and, they might not understand that that's what they can do. So for me, sending cold emails to architects and engineers and saying, hey, if your, client needs someone to help you, or help them, manage their project, because not all architects offer that service. And, my one project I have right now, it's not super exciting, but it's permit expediting. So, and also we're working on demo permits. So based on my experience working in land development, I had a lot of experience demolishing houses, on sites that were going to be redeveloped. So there's a lot of work involved with that. There's several steps you have to take before you can get your demo permit, working with, say a historic review or getting disconnects for gas, electric. And in that sense, talking with the clients and letting them know, okay, Comcast has to come and disconnect from the buildings, but they have service running through the middle of your site. So they need to go above and beyond. They might need to do some relocations. So, just trying to kind of help them walk through that to understand that it's not just saying disconnect our gas, because, the utility might want to relocate the main and take that opportunity to do some bigger infrastructure work. So just letting them know that it's not always as simple on a project. And also, one of my goals is to take what I've learned, in construction management and teaching, and try to guide them to just do projects better. Because I think, today actually the AIA sent out a questionnaire, a survey about they're trying to connect with the Lean Construction Institute, which is great. So, one thing I always talk with my students about is when you're starting a project, how do you start it off on the right foot so people's expectations are met? I created a handout about, because somebody asked, what happens in a pre-construction meeting? So I created an agenda, and just from my experience, things that, we discuss, to try to pass that knowledge on to, some project owners that, hey, before you start the project, let's sit down and talk about, do you want to do partnering or use some aspects of partnering? Who makes decisions? Making sure that the right people are making decisions, that everybody knows that. Sitting with the client and saying, okay, you're going to do this project, but are you aware that the construction is just not the building? It's, you have all your entitlements, but then you have to work with the utility companies. How are you going to pick your design team? That your schedule is just not this for construction. It's way bigger. And are they aware of all the things that need to be done and all the decisions they have to make?
I hope you enjoyed our discussion today. Check out the description below for any resources, links, and contact information we discussed. Did you like the conversation today? Is there something you'd like to know more about or a topic I should cover? Leave me a comment below and I will see what I can do to best answer your questions. And if you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel. It does really help others be able to find this resource to have larger conversations. So leave me a comment and subscribe. I really appreciate your support.